Back. Here we are at January 6th of 2023, and we got the loop playing here, and not much going on, but that's the problem. There's not much going on here. We had an X flare on this day, and there should be a huge eruption right here. Okay? Now, we had an X flare with no CME, with no coronal mass ejection. And we'll go over to the other instrument, and I just want you to look at this area right here. And let me just do something real quick while we're here. I want you to watch these opening frames here, and we'll pause it. The opening frames. All right, let's back up a little bit here. All right, here we are at 024 on the 6th, okay? At this time, we have an X flare that's coming out, in just a second here. Right at this moment, 136, 148, there's an X flare that's erupting here on the sun in this area. But yet, this isn't the zone. It's coming out more over here. So I don't think this is from it. And as we continue on, there's just no huge explosion like we see from an X flare. Now, it's possible to have a flare on the sun without a coronal mass ejection, but that's usually an A class or a B class, the smaller flares. It's the C class and M class flares that give these huge explosions and usually, captured these objects in there. And when I saw there was an X class flare, I couldn't wait to see this data loaded up so we could see what kind of explosion it produced, and it produced nothing. So now we're going over to this instrument here. Let me adjust. I didn't. Ready here. Okay. We're going to zoom in here real quick before we zoom in. I want you to note the time. This is the 6th on the 2023, and we're at 1:44, and here's our event already underway, okay? And this event took place. Whoops, let me scroll back up here a little bit. It took place starting at 1:05, and there was nothing at 1:05. From 1:05 to about 1 or 2, let's see, a pretty long duration one, till about 3:35 until this event kind of fades away. So 2 hours there from 1 to 3, and we didn't see anything. Let's back it up here. Pull back just a little bit so you can see this time. So there's 136, all right, 125. So in this area, we're having an X flare, yet as we go forward, no coronal mass ejection, okay? So now we're going back to this one. Let me back up here and to our flare, and I want you to watch how this happens. I'm going to run it forward, and I want you to see how it pops out and then retracts and goes back in. I've never seen, in all my days of watching these instruments, I've never seen an X flare do that right there and then go back in. All right? And what I believe might be happening here, now this is just my opinion, but I think what Mike from around the world was talking about, this something puncturing our heliosphere and the sun reacting to it. I thought to myself, how would we know if it's just a normal CME or if it's a reaction from something puncturing the heliosphere? And here we have it. This is the oddest X flare I have ever seen. All right, let's just go forward a little bit. Right there, boom. And then I'll scroll down. All right, notice how it pokes out like a finger and then retracts and goes back in. Now, what I believe is going on here, and we can't back out to see the heliosphere, so we're going to use the sun here as our example of the heliosphere, okay? If this would be the edge of the heliosphere right here, right, and the sun would be very small here in the center, All the planets would be in between, all the way out here. This would be the Kuiper Belt and the very edge of the heliosphere, right? Mike was saying that this heliosphere is under pressure. Now, if something were to puncture the heliosphere, pressure from inside would want to get out and escape. So, I think what we're seeing is it would have this same reaction to the sun in the middle. So this is an identical reaction of what's happened to our heliosphere being mimicked on the sun. And I believe this little finger right here, and that's why I call it a finger, is because I believe it's pointing in the direction of this inbound object that punctured our heliosphere. In fact, I'm almost 99% sure that this thing is pointing in the direction of that event out in our heliosphere. So I hope you guys understand what I'm saying here. We're using this again as a reference as the heliosphere. It's just the sun, okay? But the sun reacts much like the heliosphere does because it's electromagnetic in nature. It has an electromagnetic field, and when something punctures it, like here, the pressure from inside wants to come out of that sphere, and it did. It came out a little bit, and if you had reverse pressure pulling this way, it would suck a little nipple off of a rubber balloon. If this was like a rubber balloon and you took a little part right here and reverse pressured it, it would pull out a little nipple-shaped protrusion like this. And I believe that this is this nipple-shaped protrusion pointing in the direction of our event, because there was no CME that came off of this. And this is an X flare, the oddest X flare I've ever seen that just pops out and then goes right back in. Usually these things, boom, have huge explosions. Let's just try this real quick. Go back here. All right, real quick. I'm just going to restart this and run this again because I want you to see right here, there is no huge explosion between 1 and 5. Absolutely nothing. There's this static and stuff down here, but there's no coronal mass ejection from this X flare, which tells me there's something different about it. And let me just go back a couple of days here. I think it was here maybe that we had a huge CME off the side of the sun. I think it was this day. I may be wrong. But even this little flare over here, or this CME, I mean, these are small B and C class flares that cause CMEs. That's not the day. Where was it? Was it the 5th here? Maybe it was. I can't remember the day now, but there was a huge blast over here that was an M class. And it did a huge blast. See, look at this one. And that's just a small one. And it did more of a CME than that X flare did. So that tells me that's something different, and it's something significant. And this little protrusion, this appendage sticking out right here, is acting just as if something had punctured. Imagine if this was a ball full of jelly and you punctured it. It didn't pop, but it let some of it out. The rest of it would retreat back in, and this electromagnetic field would seal up this puncture wound. So as we move through this again, I'm going to back it up. I want you to see how it pokes out, goes back in, and that protrusion, that wound heals up a little bit. You see what I'm saying? So we'll go backwards, and just look how quick it pops out, and it only comes out so far. It just stops all of a sudden right there, and then decides to go back in. It's just a little pop right on the surface with no coronal mass ejection. That is the oddest X flare. And after I looked at this, I thought, how odd, but, let's see the other data. And when we came over to here, and there's absolutely no explosion here, no coronal mass ejection from that X flare, that tells me there's something different. That's a sign in the sun. We're just letting this run through, load up real quick one more time. I shouldn't have clicked away from it, but where's our CME? Where's this huge X-flare explosion? Just nothing. So that tells me that that little X-flare right here is something different. And that's what I was looking for. I thought, you know, when we see, I was expecting activity from this event to affect the sun on the 6th, because it takes 17 to 18 hours for it to travel all the way from the outside of the heliosphere to the intersolar system. Okay, if this was a big ball and this was our heliosphere again with the sun in the center, it takes about 17 to 18 hours for it to get all the way to the sun and make an impact. And I was looking for any kind of, I figured there would be some kind of CME, but instead we had this odd X flare with this weird finger-like protrusion. And just like some of these other spikes that I show you on these things, you know, on this side over here that I say these things point in the direction of an inbound object. Well, I believe that this thing is pointing at our heliospheric puncture or disruption. Okay? So, even though there's not much activity on the sun to report, we actually have something different going on here, folks. Okay? There's been all sorts of different activity on the sun. I keep reporting on this weird stuff that I'm not expecting to report on. And now we have this odd little finger-shaped, little nipple-type protrusion sticking out of the sun, producing an X-flare. There's your X-flare right there. But then it just stops and goes back in. Yeah, something's different about that, and I'm almost 100% sure this is our response to the puncture in the heliosphere, and I hope Mike knows it. In fact, I'm pretty sure he does know it, and they're probably studying exactly what the trajectory and what that thing was pointing to. So it's like God's finger pointing in the direction, warning you, hey, something's coming from over here. So I'm going to be watching the sun like a hawk, because I know it's going to have more and more responses as we continue on through this. So that's it for tonight. There's God's finger right there. Here, let me zoom back in on it real quick. God's finger pointing and warning you, hey, something coming from this direction over here. This is where we had our heliospheric breach, is in that direction in this quadrant. So I would expect to see more activity coming from this zone of the sun, even though it's got sunspots rotating around. We might see more stuff from this quadrant of the sun. That's it for tonight. I love you all. God bless you all. And until my next video, bye.